You wake up one summer morning feeling perfectly well. By mid-morning, a sudden cold shiver runs through you, and a strange sense of dread. Then comes the sweat, drenching, pouring off you, a pounding headache, a racing heart, a thirst that cannot be quenched. And by nightfall, you are dead, from the first shiver to the grave, less than a single day. This was a real disease. It swept through England 5 separate times, killing tens of thousands, and it had a cruel habit of striking down the young and the strong rather than the old and the frail. And then, after a few decades of terror, it simply stopped. It vanished from the face of the earth and was never seen again, and to this day, no one knows what it was. It is one of several diseases that have completely disappeared. Some we destroyed on purpose. Some retreated for reasons we still cannot explain. And some, like that one, remain total mysteries. Today, we're counting down 7 diseases that vanished, and the strangest thing about them is not how they killed, but how they disappeared. A quick warning before we go further: this one is grim, and every disease here is real. Number 7. Leprosy, or at least the leprosy of medieval Europe. For centuries, it was one of the most feared afflictions on the continent, because it did not simply kill you. It slowly, visibly consumed the body over years, and long before it took your life, it took your place among the living. Those diagnosed with it were declared, in some regions, dead to the world, rid a funeral rite while still breathing, then cast out. They were forced to carry a bell or a wooden clapper to warn others of their approach, and were shut away in isolated colonies at the edges of towns. At its height, medieval Europe was dotted with thousands upon thousands of these leper houses, and then, over the course of a couple of centuries, the disease drained away, the colonies emptied. By the end of the Middle Ages, the great wave of European leprosy had all but gone. Why it faded is still debated. Perhaps the Black Death swept away those already weakened by it. Perhaps the rise of another disease crowded it out. Perhaps segregation slowly worked. What's certain is that a plague which had haunted Europe for 1,000 years quietly loosened its grip and never took hold there in the same way again. Number 6. Chlorosis, once known as the green sickness. This one is strange because it wasn't a plague at all. It was a disease that vanished, not because we cured it, but because we stopped believing in it. For roughly 300 years, doctors diagnosed enormous numbers of young women with chlorosis, a condition marked by weakness, fatigue, fainting, and a pale, faintly greenish tint to the skin. It filled the medical textbooks. It was discussed, seriously and constantly, as one of the most common ailments of young womanhood, a rite of passage almost expected of girls of a certain age. And then, in the early 20th century, it simply evaporated from medicine. Today, most believe that at least some cases were ordinary iron deficiency anemia, but that the diagnosis itself was as much about the era's anxieties around young women as it was about anything in their blood. When those ideas changed, a disease that physicians had confidently seen in front of them for 3 centuries abruptly ceased to exist. Number 5. The Plague of Athens. In the year 430 BC, as war raged around the city, a devastating sickness tore through the packed, besieged population of Athens. It killed perhaps 1/3 of the people inside the walls, including the great statesman Pericles himself. And we know it in extraordinary detail, because the historian Thucydides caught the disease, survived it, and forced himself to write down everything he saw. He described the burning fever, the red and inflamed eyes, the bleeding throat, the violent retching, the skin breaking out in sores, and a thirst so terrible that some threw themselves into wells. Worse still, he described what the plague did to the living, the sick abandoned to die alone for fear of contagion, bodies left piled in the streets, and the slow collapse of law, custom, and decency as people came to believe they were already doomed. And yet, nearly 2,500 years later, with all of his careful notes in hand, we still cannot say for certain what it was. Typhus, typhoid, smallpox, measles, some viral horror we have never named, every candidate has been argued and disputed. The plague that helped end the golden age of Athens remains, to this day, unidentified. If the vanished corners of our own history keep pulling you in like this, take a second to subscribe. Chasing down the strangest true stories our species has left behind is the entire reason this channel exists. And stay with us, because the diseases from here on didn't just kill thousands, they reshaped the world and then disappeared. Number 4. Cocoliztli. In the 1500s, in the aftermath of the Spanish arrival in the Americas, a catastrophe unfolded that most of the world has never heard of. A disease the local people called Cocoliztli, meaning simply pestilence, swept through the population of Mexico in a series of massive epidemics. A physician who witnessed it recorded the horror of its symptoms: raging fever, black tongue, jaundice, and blood flowing from the eyes, the nose, and the mouth. The death toll was almost beyond comprehension. By some estimates, these outbreaks helped kill the overwhelming majority of the native population, millions upon millions of people, making it one of the deadliest epidemics in all of human history. And for centuries, no one had any idea what it was. Only very recently did scientists studying the ancient DNA buried in the teeth of the victims find a possible culprit, a form of deadly enteric fever, perhaps unleashed by drought and catastrophe. Even now, the case is not fully closed. A plague that helped empty an entire civilization stayed a mystery for 400 years. Number 3. The plague itself, or rather, its disappearance from Europe. We all know the Black Death of the 1300s, the pandemic that killed perhaps half the continent. But what few people realize is that the plague did not strike once and then leave. It came back again and again, wave after wave, for the next 4 centuries, haunting Europe for generation after generation. The Great Plague of London tore through the city in the 1660s. A final ferocious outbreak struck the French port of Marseille in the 1720s. And then it stopped. The great epidemics flared, died, and did not come back at that scale. The plague quietly withdrew from Western Europe. Why is one of history's genuine unsolved questions. Better quarantines, changes in the rats and fleas that carried it, new building materials, shifts in climate, perhaps a change in the microbe itself, all have been proposed, and none has ever settled the matter. A killer that had shaped European life for 400 years released its grip on the continent, and we still argue about exactly why. Number 2. Smallpox. And this one is different from every other disease on this list, because it did not vanish by accident or by mystery. We hunted it to extinction. For thousands of years, smallpox was one of humanity's great destroyers. It covered the body in pustules, it blinded, it left the survivors permanently scarred, and it killed roughly a third of everyone it infected. Hundreds of millions of people across the centuries, striking down kings and peasants without distinction. Then a country doctor named Edward Jenner noticed that milkmaids who had caught the mild cowpox seemed protected from the killer, and from that observation grew the very first vaccine. And in the 20th century, our species mounted one of the most ambitious campaigns it has ever attempted, to chase smallpox into every last village and corner of the earth and stamp it out entirely. Astonishingly, it worked. The final natural case was recorded in 1977. Smallpox is now gone from the world, the only human disease we have ever deliberately erased from existence. It is, perhaps, the single greatest thing medicine has ever done. And number 1, the disease we began with, the English sweating sickness. It appeared seemingly out of nowhere in the year 1485, and it was like nothing anyone had ever seen. It killed with terrifying speed. A person could be merry at breakfast and dead by supper. It seemed to prefer the young, the healthy, and the well-fed, striking down men in their prime while sparing the weak. It swept England in 5 distinct epidemics over about 70 years, each one spreading fresh panic, and a physician of the time set down its dreadful course in careful detail. Then, after its final appearance around 1551, it was simply gone. It never came back. And here is the part that still unsettles historians. Despite everything we now know about disease, no one has ever been able to say with certainty what it actually was. A hantavirus, some unknown infection, a killer that no longer exists. Every answer is a guess. A disease arrived from nowhere, killed within hours, terrorized a nation for 3 generations, and then vanished forever, taking its very identity into the grave with it. So there they are, 7 diseases, gone. Some we destroyed, some faded for reasons we still cannot name, and some vanished so completely that they carried their secrets away with them entirely. And that leaves an uncomfortable thought to sit with. We tend to imagine that we understand the world of disease now, that we have mapped it, named it, and mastered it. But the sweating sickness reminds us that a thing can arrive without warning, kill without mercy, and disappear without ever once explaining itself. So of all the illnesses in the world today, how certain are we, really, that we have named them all, and that nothing is still waiting out there to arrive from nowhere, exactly as it did in 1485? Tell us which of these 7 unsettled you the most, down in the comments.